Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. Now, Nona, the head of the FMA, got stuck into the financial services industry today. What happened?
Well, he was invited to give a speech to the Financial Services Council. This is the head of the Financial Markets Authority, Rob Everett, and his speech was quite hard-hitting. It's probably more hard-hitting than we're used to hearing from the Financial Markets Authority. Talk to the industry about the lack of trust. We've seen recently what's happened in Australia with the Royal Commission there into the misconduct of banking, insurers, and so forth. Well, he talked a bit about that to the industry, and he said, you know, certainly there's some serious concerns that have been raised. And he said that we had something to learn from what's been happening there. And this is a little bit from his speech today, and this is Rob Everett speaking to that conference.
We are determined to play our part, ensuring that this is treated as an opportunity for you, the industry, and an opportunity for us, the regulators, to ask some hard questions about how the industry behaves, about how we regulate it, about what we're all here for. We hope that at the end of that process, a truly customer-centric industry will be in place, or at least working towards being in place, because we know that doesn't happen overnight. So you could say, if you look back to the GFC, that what we're in now is the second phase of the financial crisis, and certainly a crisis in trust.
Chief Executive there of the Financial Markets Authority speaking to the Financial Finance Council this morning. And so Rob Everett, well, his words, you know, certainly would have resonated with that group, yes.
And what's been the response from the financial services industry?
Well, I think they've been up for it. They know that this was coming. To some extent, they came up with their code of conduct was also released today. It's got a number of points, 9 points, all sorts of things to do with ethical standards, what's the customer perspective, and what does it mean to deliver good outcomes to consumers? And the last and final point is that members must treat their customers fairly. And certainly the FMA, you can expect there'll be a crackdown. They've even threatened to, you know, name and shame companies that don't don't come into line.
Don't go by their code of ethical standards.
That's right. It's really become quite an issue. And they said, you know, it's not just, okay, sure, you know, companies talk about having to put shareholders first and investors first and so forth. But he's saying at the heart of our regulation is to put the customer first. And I think customers should start demanding that is actually what happens. So.
Well, we'll see what happens. Now, I hear it's been a sea of red for the markets today.
Oh, it's really not been a good day for the markets. So following in from Wall Street, we heard some evidence that was given by Facebook and Twitter today that saw the tech stocks fall quite heavily. But since then, the jitters that came overnight through the emerging markets in response to this rising tension with global trade really has saw a huge sell-off in the emerging markets. Those are the markets that are not in necessarily OECD, like, you know, Argentina, for example, and others. Well, that lost about $1 trillion of value overnight. Wow. So that's quite substantial. That concern has now come back into the market as Asia opened. And certainly we've seen that in New Zealand. We dropped 1.4% today. That's a significant drop. That's 126 points to 9,102. But it was on light volume because most of the analysts and so forth and market players were writing corporate reporting season reports to their shareholders, and so not so busy trading in the market. So that's kind of a relief that it was only on light volume. But among the leaders that fell, A2 Milk, which is of course New Zealand's largest company now, it was down more than 4%. Synlait Milk, again, down nearly 5%. And that follows the global dairy trade auction the day before where prices fell. Air New Zealand down nearly 4%. Ryman, the retirement village operator, and Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, both down nearly 3%. Quite substantial, folks.
And so read across the board in New Zealand today?
And Australia too. And the dollar, it perked up a little bit. That's mostly because there's so much uncertainty about what's happening with what Donald Trump's next move is with trade. There's a deadline looming today with the talk that another tariffs may be imposed on another $200 billion of Chinese imports. These are the talks that we're supposed to be concluding today. There's not really any sign that that's ended satisfactorily. And there's also talks going on with Canada and the U.S. over the North American Free Trade Agreement. that's also not looking that, the outlook there isn't that good. So yes, of course, trade tensions are very high, and our dollar is trading at 65.8 US cents, 91.8 Australian and 51 pence. And it's worth noting the Australian dollar is also quite low.
Thanks very much, Nona. That's our business reporter, Nona Peltier.